Hey, all, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about Asia because what do we got in the news? Well, we got the East Coast blizzard, of course, but there's stuff going on in Asia. Look at this 50 days cold snap hits Asia. What's going on there? Well, there is a pretty interesting outbreak there. This is probably one of the stronger cold waves I've seen in some time. I forecasted in Korea for about a year, and I hadn't seen anything quite this strong. But this is 16th of January right here. Let me switch over to Thumbs Plus and I'll... Okay, what you see here is conditions back on the 16th of January. We kind of have to run this back for a couple of reasons. Look at the weather across China. This is China. This is Mongolia. This is Siberia. Here we have the two Koreas, and here we have Japan. So what do we see here? We have temperatures in the 40s and 50s, kind of drizzly, cloudy weather. In Korea, we have 40s, and north of that, in the higher terrain of Mongolia, further north, around 0. So this is a very typical weather for this time of year. Well, if we looked at the pressure, we would see just kind of like high pressure stacked up from north to south. And it does get kind of tricky trying to analyze the weather there in Asia. I find that actually, to a certain extent, relative vorticity and careful attention to the wind field helps quite a bit, because otherwise these systems kind of become obscured. Okay, so what's the conditions we have on the 16th? Well, we can see we have northerly flow coming up from the higher terrain of Asia. And here we have kind of indeterminate flow, kind of a weak southerly flow. And this is kind of, what we have here is kind of a weak frontal boundary that looks like this. So you see that there? Flow coming from the north of the Yellow Sea. In Korea, we have this stagnant polar flow running about like that. So kind of like that. So this kind of points to maybe a generalized area of cyclonic development in eastern China, right there west of the Yellow Sea. So how does that progress? Here's the next day. I'm looking at 06Z for all of these charts. These are all afternoon. So you get to kind of see how warm the air mass gets with daytime heating. So this is about 2 to 3 p.m. And what do we have now? Now we can see, look at that, we have northerly flow coming down through China. Temperatures have cooled off to the 20s, and they've cooled off there in Korea too. And so now we have kind of a front, it's kind of hard to tell exactly where, but if we follow the wind flow, looks like it's right around here, just southwest of Jeju Island. Northerly flow probably extending down through most of eastern China right there. So we got kind of a low pressure center coming together southwest of Korea. Temperatures have cooled off a little bit down to the 30s there in Korea. So now let's take it forward another day. Before I do that, I want to show you the pressures up north. I don't know if this is off the screen, but I can see 1045 to 1050 up in Mongolia. So let's go forward to the 18th. What happens now? Now we get this blustery northerly flow. See that? We got winds, sustained winds 20 to 25 knots blowing through northern China. And that kind of paints out a low pressure area in the Sea of Japan, so out in this region here. Temperatures have fallen off to the 20s in Korea and the teens in North Korea. Also bringing a little bit cooler air through China. So this isn't particularly cold air. This is about what we see during the coldest outbreaks of the year there in Korea. But there's going to be more coming in a couple of days. The 19th, we forward this. We get a little bit of a respite, kind of a very cool day. 19 for a high there at Seoul. Still under northerly flow, and the surface low is well to the northeast. Conditions becoming kind of stagnant there in eastern China, developing a little bit of southerly flow here and there. Temperatures are rising up to the 40s, so you see we're coming back up to normals. So let's go up to the 20th. Not a whole lot of change, just stagnating again, 20s across Korea, seeing kind of an easterly flow here in China. developing a little bit of stratiform rain out through this area. Looking to the north, pressures are in the 1040s. Let's run it up another day. Look at that. Now we got another outbreak. Pressures have come up to 1060. So kind of a fast-breaking development of Arctic air starting to come down south through China. And down to the south, stagnant weather. So it looks like the leading edge of this thing is somewhat like that. Temperatures up to 29 there in Seoul. So it looks like we're going to see another cool down here. 22nd. See, now we've got a lot deeper northerly flow. You just don't really see this analyzing the pressure. You can see gradients from time to time, but it's really hard to pick out these fronts. They're not quite as sharply defined as what we have in the U.S. So here in the U.S., we're kind of lucky. We get these very potent weather systems. In Asia, they're a lot more subtle, and some years we don't see anything like this. So look at that, 30 knots there in the Yellow Sea, 25 to, along the coast of Asia, or coast of China. Shanghai, 37 there, 34, lots of 30s, and you can see we're starting to develop some snow. So now we're getting this cold air barreling south. Now we're starting to see some 20s and 30s through this area. Korea has cooled off to below 20 in most places. So just more cold air filtering down. And then the 24th, now we're down to 13 for highs there in Seoul. And lots of 20s across China. And you can see we've cleared off a lot of that precip that we had. What's happened is we've actually driven a lot of that cold air well to the south. In fact, look at that, 45 knots there sustained off the coast of Shanghai. So how far south? Well, let's pull this slider bar down. Resize this real quick so you can really check this out. So there we go. Afternoon temperatures of 45 there at Okinawa. That's very, very cold for that particular place. So now we got northerly flow through Taiwan, through these trailing Japan islands, whatever that is, and even up to the coast of the Philippines. We've got 58 to 66 offshore there, so that's pretty amazing there. The day before this, we had temperatures, see that 90 degrees there in northern Thailand, 90, 90, 91, 84 there in Laos. Well, that changes very quickly. 24th, you can see now we've got 54 there in Laos, 72, 63. So we've had a massive cool down through that part of Southeast Asia. So that front is probably blown through Thailand itself, so it's getting way down into the tropical latitudes. We got 25 knots there offshore in the Philippines. See that right there? That's pretty unusual for the Philippines. So we've blown that front straight through. 34 off the coast there of Thailand, and 37 there at Hong Kong. So this is some very potent cold air. It's undergoing tremendous modification, though, going over these shallow, warm waters. So we're not going to see like Arctic air going all the way down to Singapore or Indonesia, anything like that. But this cold front is driving well to the south, and that brings us up to 1 hour ago. So this is the latest chart we have. Temperature's starting to come up to the north there in China, but the brunt of this outbreak is affecting Southeast Asia. So there we got 54 there at Hanoi and 64 along the coast of Vietnam, and lots of 50s. Look at that, 59 there in Thailand, 64. This is probably getting close to like record temperatures there. This is afternoon temperatures. Pretty amazing there. And 67 off the coast there, south of Hainan Island, but still warm temperatures hanging on there in the Philippines because there's a long trajectory coming off the coast there of China all the way down to the Philippines. So we don't see quite as much modification. But the dew points are down to 61, so lots of dry air, and they're probably getting some some very cool nights there in the Philippines. So a lot to look at, and that's kind of how a cold air outbreak unfolds there in Asia. So I think that's about all I have on that. Hope you enjoyed that. We'll see you probably tomorrow.